Hello and welcome to episode 49 of MMO Weekly, presented by Chitty's Cheesesteaks. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, along with MMO executive editor and co-host Mike Mayer. And Mike, more of the same since we spoke last. More series lost, more bullpen woes, and more weird decisions by the manager, and just some poor baseball overall. So more of the same from us, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's unfortunately a trend for the Mets at this point that they continue to lose series and continue to do it in sloppy ways and for Mets fans, heartbreaking ways at times too. So, yeah, they're winning 1-0 as we tape this, but as we've seen, anything can happen with the Mets bullpen right now when they need multiple innings there. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, nothing. The Mets are closer to the worst record in the National League than they are a playoff spot. And to me, that pretty much says it all. I mean, that tells you what the Mets are right now, and a lot of what we're going to talk about drives off of that fact completely. About whether it's the trade deadline, it's who should be getting fired, and all of that. It's just it's certainly not where Steve Cohen thought he was going to be at in late June in 2023.
Yeah, I don't think anybody thought they were going to be there, whether it's Epler, whether it's Showalter. Nobody, I think, in that regime thought this was going to be the case. But unfortunately, it's kind of the team that they're at. Like we said, they're just not playing good baseball overall. But we should start the show. There was a trade that happened. Eduardo Escobar, suddenly in the middle of the game the other day, got traded to the Angels for a couple of prospects. One in particular, I believe, was the Angels' 7th or 8th organizational prospect ranked, a pitcher. So, get a couple of arms there, hopefully one that can maybe turn into something, but, could be the beginning of quite a few of these veterans on the Mets outside of a couple of guys, I would say, probably getting shipped out of here between now and August 1st.
Yeah, I mean, the Mets have lost. They lost that game and they lost the next game. So I think mindsets change pretty quickly, especially once you get into July and you go on a streak of losing. But I don't think the Mets really did that trade at the time with the intention of, well, this is just the start of us trading veteran pieces. Like that wasn't really that type of trade. It was more of Escobar's getting very few at bats and
Right.
essentially has almost no role on this team. Once Pham started hitting and Canna started hitting, that really limited what they're going to do with Escobar because he was getting some at bats at DH or at second base and McNeil in the outfield because Canna and Pham were both struggling. But Canna and Pham have, particularly Pham, but Canna's been better recently too, are both playing well. So that really limits what Escobar's role is. Look, Beatty has, well, he's been on base twice tonight and has a nice little streak of multi-hit games going, but he had a down stretch to start June. But the reality is he's going to start at third base.
Right.
He's the third baseman of the future. So I think Epler did good in this trade. And obviously it helped that they were willing to eat all the money
Right.
in Escobar's contract minus the league minimum. So that certainly helped them get a better return. But yeah, you mentioned Coleman Crowe, who is 8th in their prospect, was 8th according to Fangraphs in the Angels prospect rankings. I think he was 18th or 19th according to MLB. So there's some fluctuation there. But either way, this is a guy that was pitching really well in Double A this year before he went on the injured list. Billy Epler did say that he had some elbow inflammation, but it's not surgery. He's throwing now, and he's going to throw to live hitters soon, and then they're going to work him in before the end of the year. So I think that's a nice get for Escobar. Like we said, you're essentially talking about a role player that hasn't been great over the
Mm-hmm.
last year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
He's so you don't expect there to be a ton of value there, and then they got Landon Marceau in the deal as well. So he was a third round pick a couple of years ago. He hadn't pitched great in Double A, and he got knocked around a little bit in his Mets Double A debut. But I mean, the Mets decided to pitch him a day after the trade, which was kind of interesting. But he was ranked 25th by Fangraphs and 20th by MLB. So again, I mean, the Angels don't have a great system. But you still got two top 30 guys for Escobar, and I don't think many people would have expected that had they been told that Escobar was traded. And to guess what they got, I don't think many Mets fans would have been expecting that. Crow, when MLB updated their ratings, Crow was 11th in the Mets system, and Marcelo was 18th. So again, that it's certainly look, the Met system isn't great, particularly after the graduations of Beatty, Alvarez, and Vientos. But these are two guys that certainly make it better. And look, the Mets we know need some upper level pitching. So to get two of those guys that you can plug in and be starters in Double A is certainly useful pieces for them.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, kicking in the money there certainly helps. And I can't help but think, and I do disagree to a point as far as what you're saying, that this isn't, necessarily throwing in the towel, right? Trying to trade those more veteran guys. But if things are going the way that they're going, right? And it's not like they're playing tight ball games. They're playing hard. They're playing right. Just things aren't kind of falling their way. We talked about it on the last show. They just don't do little things right. It's just not a good baseball team right now. You don't think that they would, and again, I think obviously eating money like they do with the Escobar deal is going to help, like you said, bringing a better return with a lot of these shorter term veteran guys. But guys like Canna, Marte, really outside of, I would say, uh, Nimmo, guys, you sign long term. You don't think that they would try and at least replenish the farm system a bit, upgrade it a bit if it's going to be a lost year with some of these shorter contract veterans that they have, or, shorter term, you should say. Marte signed a couple of more years. But you don't think they would be able to, or would be interested in, trying to, and again, I don't want to say wave the white flag, but understand this is a year that now they're probably not going to compete and get as much as they can for the guys that aren't going to be here in the long term.
Well, I mean, maybe they decide that, but it's still June 26th, and
Right.
they made that trade on June 24th. The Mets were certainly not making a decision to be sellers on June 24th. That's not something Cohen is going to sign off on. Um, Maybe in 4 weeks, if the Mets continue to struggle, they decide to sell, and you see someone, yeah, like Tommy Pham and David Robertson are the two obvious ones. I mean, Robertson is probably going to get you the most because he's going to be one of the best closers on the market. Probably likely is the best closer on the
Right.
market. And if Pham keeps hitting like he has, he'll certainly get you a decent prospect too. But I think those are really the only two trade pieces. I mean, yeah, you mentioned Mark Canna, but he also has a pretty reasonable option for next year,
Mm-hmm.
just like Escobar did.
Sure.
Escobar has an option for next year. They could look to move Canna too, but I, I know the Mets have not played well, and they're not close right now, but all it takes is one little winning streak, and they're 4 games out of a playoff spot. And the Mets are simply not going to sell if they're 4, even 5 games away from a playoff spot. Cohen put too much money into this team, particularly into short-term players like Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, to just rip it up. And so, yeah, let's say the Mets are 9, 10 games away when you're up to the trade deadline. Because teams wait till the trade deadline for the most part because there is so many playoff spots now. So teams wait as long as they can. But yeah, 9, 10 games out, Tommy Pham, David Robertson, Mark Canna. Um, yeah, I think those are the type of guys you'll see get traded. Adam Ottavino, all those guys that have 1 year or 1 year and an option. So I don't think it gets beyond that because again, like Max Scherzer is going to opt into his contract next year, and Scherzer's looked good recently. Um, Justin Verlander, you're not going to trade him because you're going to want to win next year. Even selling off guys like Tommy Pham and David Robertson and Mark Hanna and guys like that, Adam Ottavino, that doesn't change anything for next year really because A, they're going to be free agents, or B, they're likely going to be free agents if their options are declined. So that doesn't change anything for next year. So I think those are pretty much like the 4 names you would be talking about that would be on the trading block if a month from now the Mets are basically in the same position they are now.
Yeah, no, I know, I know it's the end of June, and I've preached a lot so far this season. It's kind of what you're saying. A little hot streak can get a team going. Really, 1 month of good baseball can kind of change things for them. I know that there's wild card spots. We've been saying that a ton. It's just it just feels more and more like this team just they don't mesh. Whatever it is, just doesn't feel like they're going to be primed for a run. I hope I'm wrong. There's obviously going to be a whole nother half of baseball after this. And as Met fans, I think we're used to the opposite. We're used to them starting off well and having poor second halves. So maybe it'll be the opposite of this. You can best case scenario, hope so. But right now it just looks like a team that's old and just not just the opposite of and I hate keep comparing that. I know it's a lot of guys that are different and stuff like that, but just it was the same concept of you brought in a lot of guns for hire, was a lot of new players, things like that, and they just seem to gel so well, and it's just not happening this year. I'm at a loss for words at points because I just feel like we say the same things over and over now, and we're going to transition obviously to the bullpen struggles, which we've talked about was eventual with the way the starting pitching they've gotten so far, but yesterday's loss to Philly was really that was of a bad season. Probably the worst loss that they've had all year. Just the implosion, having a 3-run lead like that, the way they lost the game. But again, when you're running out guys from the bullpen, that A, I don't know if anyone heard of a couple of them before yesterday, and B, when your high leverage guys are sitting there and you choose not to use them, that's a problem. But it's just more of the same every time we talk every week.
Well, I think the biggest issue with the Mets' loss to the Phillies is that Buck Showalter went into the game knowing that he didn't have Brooks Raley. He was unavailable. He didn't want to use Adam Ottavino, and he he didn't want to use Robertson for more than an inning. So what he did was he let Carrasco go 4 innings, who was pitching, I mean, fairly well, especially considering how Carrasco's season has gone. He had only given up 2 runs.
Yep.
And he had 5 Ks, 4 innings. Like he had a couple of jams that he broke out of, but he wasn't getting knocked around by any means. So for me, that's where it all starts: is why are you taking Carrasco out after 4 innings if you know that you essentially don't want to use 2 of your best relievers and would really like to stay away from your third best reliever? And Drew Smith still wasn't active yet. So why are you not at least trying to squeeze one more out of Carrasco? At least have Carrasco start the inning and have someone warming up.
Right.
So that's where it starts with that really poor first decision of pulling Carrasco in that scenario. You can certainly make the case, like in some scenarios, that's the right move with Carrasco, not wanting him to face the lineup third time through. But that's not the scenario the Mets were in. They didn't have a completely fresh bullpen. And then the biggest issue is I think it's fine to try to start Josh Walker in that inning. But if he starts running into trouble, which he did immediately, that's where David Robertson should have been warming up. Because it's a 6-3 game. And then if he's getting into trouble, likely that he's going to face, Robertson would be facing the tying run, go-ahead run. So that's the scenario that you want to save Robertson for. And he didn't. He brought in Jeff Brigham, who did get the ground ball that he needed to start, and Beatty did make a misplay there.
We'll talk about that.
And that happens, and then Brigham just kind of struck out the next guy and then just kind of went off the rails after that, hit a couple of guys, and then finally got out of it. But the Mets were down by the time he got out of it. And then, curiously, when the Mets were down then, Robertson was then warming up in the 9th inning to come in, essentially, if the Mets had tied or taken the lead. Yeah. And it just doesn't make... The Mets are essentially... Every game is must-win at this point.
Right.
To get back into a position where you can trade for players and make a run at a playoff spot. So essentially, every game you're playing is must-win. And I think even more so when you're talking about games in the division.
Sure.
When you're not playing as much as in the division.
Yep.
So to me, everyone that is available should have pitched in that game before Jeff Brigham in a situation where the go-ahead runs at the plate. Brigham's had some nice outings for the Mets, but he's a sixth inning guy. He's not
Right.
the eighth inning highest leverage at bats of the game type guy. That's not where he's supposed to be plugged in. And look, Buck also said that Ottavino wasn't available, and then Ottavino after the game said he was available.
Right.
So that's not really a good thing. And if you just look at like a quick look, you see, oh, Robertson pitched, got 5 outs the day before. Well, he only did it on 13 pitches,
Right.
and Robertson had only faced, I think it was something crazy like 11 batters over a 10-day span.
Sure.
So he's certainly fresh, and the
Right.
fact that only threw 13 pitches the day before, and Buck had planned on using him for an inning, but only if he got a lead. But you can't play baseball that
Right.
way. And
Right.
Buck, we saw it last year with Buck in important games against the Braves do the exact same thing.
Yep.
And we all know the Zach Britton situation.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
there's a trend here, and it's not a good trend, and it's one the Mets knew when they hired Buck, and I'm sure it's one they hope it changed a little bit. Having end with Diaz last year certainly
Right.
hit it.
Right.
Like when you have the best closer in baseball, that can
Right.
hide or make it easier to
Mm-hmm.
overlook bad decisions. And it can
Absolutely.
certainly make you look better too as a manager. So I th- there wasn't any good reason for Buck to handle any of that game the way he did on the pitching
Right.
side. And the blame completely falls on him for that. And after the game, he essentially was asked if he could redo it, if he would, and he said no. He got kind of testy with the media and is like, well, what do you want me to do? That's not word for word, but that was his attitude and
Yep.
basically what he said. So, and wouldn't take any, he essentially didn't put himself out there to take the blame for the game. And then it fell on the shoulders of a 23-year-old rookie and Brett Beatty to do that. And props to Beatty. He took it on the shoulder and said that it was his fault, which obviously that play was a big play. But that one play isn't the only reason.
Yeah, no, definitely. And to what Mike is saying, as far as Beatty being a rookie, right? Taking onus on the after the game and was, put it on his shoulders. It's his fault that they lost in that particular play. Obviously I agree with Mike there, but as far as, we've talked about it on the show a ton as far as with Alvarez and Beatty, putting that much pressure on rookies, right? That much pressure on any young player isn't fair. It's not right to do. And you can't expect to be successful that way. This is a team that's just not playing championship level baseball, and it's all around. Beatty, obviously, with his mistakes as far as errors go. We saw it yesterday and again last night. Well, last night and then again tonight as well. Made a throwing error look like he double clutched. Something that wasn't happening as much when he first got called up, but now seems to be happening a little bit more frequently than we're used to as far as with the defense. You hope it's not in his head. That would be worst case scenario there. But yeah, it's as far as with Buck goes as well, even after the post game press conference, as far as talking about, I believe it was Tim Healy a Newsday, asking as far as the starters for this upcoming week and if they had anybody scheduled for Tuesday, who their starter was, and Buck got testy as far as I don't know what's going to happen the next day, sort of thing. When in reality, if you're a good baseball team, you have a rotation, who's going to pitch every 5 days. That's not something that's out of the ordinary. It's not an out of the ordinary question. Like it was totally fine to ask. And, Buck seems to be getting a little testy with the media. Obviously, the team's not doing well. And the buttons he's pushing don't seem to work. And especially with the bullpen, he seems to be a day late and dollar short. But when you're struggling, that's what's going to happen. It's unfortunate, but it's just, he doesn't seem like the right manager for this group. I don't know if they have a run primed in them or not. I was optimistic for a while because, again, 3 teams make the postseason. That's something that really the Mets should be one of those teams, but the way they're playing right now, this just isn't championship level baseball at all. They just continue to lose series after series, and that was something that did the exact opposite last year. And obviously, you're seeing, what that's becoming now, and 7 teams ahead of them, I believe, in the wild card as of tonight. They're 8 games back. I'm gonna have to leapfrog 7 teams. Again, it's gonna be a whole nother second half. Don't know what's gonna happen, but as of right now, this seems like a team that's not headed for anything great. We'll see what happens there, and that's going to obviously wrap things up. Mike had a little bit of technical difficulties at the end there, but that is going to wrap us up for this week. We'll catch you next week. Hopefully, the Mets will tighten some things up between now and then. I won't hold my breath or anything, but we can hope for the best. But until now and then, guys, let's go Mets.